Hi, good afternoon. So today I wanted to do a little video based on the NLP method, neuro-linguistic programming, of the 5-minute phobia cure. Now this is one that I've used quite a few times and absolutely love it because it confuses the way that you remember the memory. So it's really good if all of a sudden you've developed fears and especially phobias as well. It's good for phobias, and what that will then do is it changes the way that you react to a certain situation. So we're actually born just with two fears: the fear of noise and the fear of falling. Everything else we have learned. We've learned as a result of our behaviours, or possibly other behaviours from people around us, and we've taken on that as a secondary response to what's happened. So not too long ago, I dealt with a client for fear of flying. Now, she'd been flying around the world for years, and quite recently she's developed these anxieties and completely irrational thoughts about flying. And she would go through this about how she would feel, how she'd get sweaty, how she'd get anxious, having full-blown panic attacks. And then, so what I did straight away is I actually spoke to her about what was happening during her body during this process. And that is basically that the body was producing a hell of a lot of adrenaline. So I've drawn a little diagram behind me. Now, adrenaline. That happens, that's a response. So adrenaline is pumped out into our body as a result of the fear that we're experiencing right now. And that will send energy, instant energy, like poof, straight to our muscles where we need them, because our body is getting ready to run off. So flight, run away, we need to run away from the situation, we're fearful of it, let's go. Or fight, maybe we have to fight it out. Or freeze, we could actually freeze because we're like, oh, like stage fear, stuff like that. And then, because we're on an absolute high and we're ready to take action on whatever it is we need to do on the flight, fight or freeze, and then we don't use it, our body then needs to be calmed back down again. So that's where the cortisol comes in, because the cortisol then is produced to calm us back down. Now, ideally, what we want is to be happy again, and we want to produce the happy hormones, which is produced by the pituitary gland, and it's called oxytocin. Oxytocin relaxes and calms us and makes us feel happy again. That's what we want. We want the oxytocin, the happy hormones, which is why I put a ray of sunshine there. So how do we get a client from this state, unhappy, where there's floods of this adrenaline going on, and then the cortisol's having to come in to calm you down again, to a happy state where you've got lots of happy hormones going on? Right, so this is where the NLP technique comes into its own. So what I do with my clients, let's go back to the fear of flying. So this is something that she's developed recently, because quite clearly there's something else that was going on in her life, and part of my life coaching is to actually get to the bottom of it and find out what it is. But to begin with, we need to deal with this. This is what she's come to me for, so let's deal with the way that she is currently responding to flying, to going on that plane. So the first thing I discussed with her was the fact that, is she actually frightened of the plane, the actual plane itself? When she looks at a plane, how does she feel? And she said to me, well, no, I see planes all the time. I don't get anxious about seeing the actual plane. So then she quickly realised it was the picture in her mind of what she was playing out. So she created this whole ridiculous story, although it wasn't to her, but she kind of got that it was irrational thinking, that the plane was going to crash, or that something was going to happen on this plane. And once we'd gone through the stats of that, you're more likely to crash your car than you are to drop out of the sky. She'll quickly then realise it's not the plane she's frightened of, it's the scenario, the story that she's played out in her mind. So nothing has actually happened to her in the past for her to actually think and feel about this certain situation. So we'd grasped that, and then I said to her, right, because she started to feel a bit anxious and nervous with what we were going to do. So the first thing I did is I scored it. And I have a special scoring sheet that I use, and it has a scale on it. And I'll say, okay, so how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 5, for example? 5, really stressed and anxious about going on this business flight, and 1, feeling okay. Well, she put a 5 straight away because she was taking that flight in 2 days' time, and she was getting really stressed and totally overthinking the situation. So we then discussed the story, the start, beginning, I keep saying that, start, beginning, the start, the middle and the end. So walking to the airport, going through security, going through duty free, which actually she likes that bit, there isn't a problem with that, and then the actual getting on board the plane where it all blooming starts. So that's the middle of the story, we've got the middle there, and the end where she's touched down or where she's in the sky. We actually discovered that it was when she was in the sky she were fine, so it was the actual takeoff and then she were fine, or when she'd touched down, whichever. So get the story right. So there's a start, middle and an end, the end where she feels safe. So I asked her to close her eyes, take some deep breaths, because what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the moment where you felt scared, where you felt anxious. But the way that we're going to do that is we're going to take you to a cinema, and that could be a cinema that you visited as a child. It could be a modern cinema. Quite often with I say older clients, but clients of my age, late 30s, 40s, 50s, I'll say, right, go into this cinema, cinema that you've been to before, the carpet might be a bit sticky, smell the popcorn around you, because I want them to use all their sensory awareness to get deep inside this story or memory that they have created in their mind. And I get them to sit down in the cinema in a nice seat. It might be velvet, it might be smooth, it could be a modern one. Like I say, get them to sit down, and they can then see in front of them a big movie screen, and they are going to watch out. They're going to watch themselves in this movie take this flight. It's going to have a start, middle and an end where they feel safe again. But this movie is going to be in black and white. Now, because she was so anxious about this is why I started it in black and white. There's 2 different ways of doing it. So this is the method that I used for her. So we started the movie in black and white. But I said, before the movie begins, I want you, your body self, you, to stay sat there. But I want you now to float out of yourself as if you were a spectator looking in to the projection booth. So what I was doing then was disassociating herself from the fear to help her through the experience. It's much safer for the client to do this. So I did that. So she had to float out of her seat into the projection booth where she was going to see herself watching herself on the screen. So it's disassociating. Okay, bear with me. So 3, 2, 1, the movie's now playing in black and white. Okay, and just be quiet and allow your client to experience this. Start, middle and an end in black and white. Okay, then ask your client when she gets to the end of the movie to freeze the frame. Freeze! And leave it on that frame, that bit where she feels safe again. Then what you need to do is ask your client, who's in the projection booth currently, to float out of the projection booth right into where she's sitting, into her actual real self. So she's now sat back in herself watching the screen. Okay, so she's got closer to this movie of her playing out her fear. Now what I wanted to do was play the movie backwards, but in colour. This is the fun bit. So make the picture 3D. Make it bright in full Technicolor glory. Hear what you can hear, see what you can see, and feel everything that you can feel from playing it backwards, which is where you felt safe. So you'll really be fixated on this end last slide, won't you? Because this is where you feel safe. So make it colourful, you know, that happiness, that whatever feelings it is that they are feeling right there in that moment, and emphasise that. And say you're going to rewind the movie really, really fast, and to do that I just go zoop, and I'll do that in 3s or 5s. We always work in 3s and 5s in NLP. Zoop, zoop. And then ask your client, is there still a reaction to the way that you're currently processing this information now? And if they're like, do it again straight away. And this time, to confuse your client, you can sing circus music. So it's still at the end, tell them to go back. The frame is freezed, it's at the end where they feel completely safe and calm and at ease, to make that picture bright. Make it 3D. Feel what you can feel, see what you can hear, and notice any familiar smells, anything. Just keep on going with them, and then sing circus music as you then rewind the movie. Take it backwards, go da 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 da, and as you're doing that, you're confusing your client. It's absolutely brilliant to the way that they feel about that specific event. So then again, ask them, is there still a reaction to the way that you're feeling and processing that information if this were to happen again? And score it between 1 and 5. Remember, 5 was stressed, anxious, and 1 was alright. Now by this point your client will have moved that scoring level down, and it should be a 1 or a 2, which is massive progress. And once they've done that, I always say, well done, the change has begun. And when I do that, I tend to, if I'm working by the side of them, I might tap them here or I might tap them here. Well done, the change has begun. Because you have just changed the way that they see themselves, because they should be seeing themselves back on that last slide where they are perfectly safe and happy. Now, after I did this process, my client was very, very emotional. She wasn't quite sure what had happened, but the way that she was feeling about taking the flight in the next 2 days had changed massively. And then what I did is I gave her a good 45-minute session on hypnotherapy, which, you know, is a different video. But going back to the 5-minute phobia cure, it is absolutely brilliant. I can't recommend it enough. It's so powerful about the way that you're feeling about a situation, because you want your client to be able to get on with their lives and not let it stop them. Now, this client, she went on her flight, which was wonderful. She didn't feel anxious at all. In fact, she went to duty free. She was going to pick up a new watch, she told me, but instead she went for a meal. Now, normally she wouldn't, because she'd be too anxious about getting on the flight, and she was able to enjoy a meal. She was able to take off absolutely fine. In fact, people around her even noticed how calm and relaxed she was. So absolutely fabulous that we managed to change the way she was thinking and feeling, break down those neuro pathways, change those submodalities. It was a win-win. Now, I will put her testimonial on the end of this video for you to read. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I explained that okay and that it made perfect sense. So thank you for watching.